Welcome to Point of Darkness. This is another episode of Trips to Abandoned Hospitals. But tonight we are not exploring an abandoned hospital. Tonight's story takes us inside a forgotten boarding school for children. A place once filled with voices and life, now left with nothing but empty hallways, silence, and the disturbing feeling that something is watching from the darkness. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and prepare to descend into isolation, fear, and forgotten memories. Enjoy watching. I arrived at St. Mary's boarding school just before sunset. The building stood at the end of a long abandoned road surrounded by dead trees and rusted fences. Years ago, it had been a boarding school for orphan children somewhere in the northern part of the country. After multiple abuse allegations and several unexplained disappearances, the school was permanently shut down in the early 2000s. Since then, the place had slowly fallen apart. Most people nearby avoided it completely. Even online, information about the school was strangely limited. I only found a few old photographs, newspaper clippings, and forum posts from urban explorers who all described the same thing. The silence inside felt wrong, and the building had a way of making people feel watched. By the time I reached the property, the sky had already turned gray. Cold wind moved through the trees around the school, producing a constant low sound that almost resembled whispering. The building itself looked enormous. 3 connected sections surrounded an overgrown courtyard filled with broken playground equipment. Rusted swings moved slightly in the wind. Many windows were shattered, while others remained completely black. The school looked frozen in time. I parked near the entrance gate and grabbed my flashlight. The moment I stepped onto the property, I immediately felt uneasy. Not because I saw anything, because the place felt emotionally heavy, like something terrible had happened there long ago and never truly left. Dead leaves covered the concrete pots leading toward the entrance. Somewhere above me, metal creaked softly against metal. The front doors were partially open. Inside, darkness swallowed almost everything. I switched on my flashlight and stepped into the lobby. The air smelled old, dust, mold, rotting wood, and something faintly chemical underneath it all. The reception area still contained old desks and filing cabinets. Children's drawings were scattered across the floor, faded by moisture and time. Most of them showed normal things, houses, trees, families. But one drawing immediately caught my attention. It showed the school itself, except every window had been colored completely black. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. Then somewhere deeper inside the building, I heard a loud bang. I froze instantly. Silence followed. Then nothing. I told myself it was probably a door moving from the wind, but my body no longer fully believed those explanations. I slowly moved deeper into the hallway. The corridors inside St. Mary's felt endless. Old classroom doors lined both sides of the walls. Some classrooms still contained tiny desks covered in dust. Books and toys remained scattered across the floors, like the children had simply vanished one day without warning. The deeper I explored, the more uncomfortable the building became. Schools are supposed to feel alive. Even abandoned ones usually carry some sense of warmth left behind. But this place felt empty in the worst possible way. Cold, silent, wrong. At one point I entered what used to be a playroom. Stuffed animals sat on shelves beneath collapsed ceiling panels. Small chairs formed a circle in the center of the room. Against one wall stood an old television covered in dust, and directly beside it sat a child-sized wheelchair. Something about seeing it there made my stomach tighten immediately. The room felt untouched, like nobody had entered it in years. Then I noticed writing on the wall behind the television, very small, almost hidden beneath peeling paint. "Don't stay after dark." The words looked like they had been scratched into the wall by hand. I suddenly became very aware of how quiet the building actually was. No birds outside, no insects, nothing. Only the sound of distant wind moving somewhere through the halls. I left the playroom and continued upstairs. The staircase creaked loudly beneath every step. My flashlight beam moved across faded wallpaper covered with drawings made by children decades ago. Some drawings were happy, others weren't. One picture showed several children standing in front of the school at night. Every face had been scribbled out completely. By the time I reached the second floor, daylight outside had already started fading. The upper hallway stretched into darkness at both ends. Dormitory rooms lined the corridor. Some doors hung partially open, others were completely shut. And for some reason, the closed doors bothered me far more. As I walked past them, I kept imagining someone standing silently behind the wood listening to my footsteps, waiting for them to stop. I entered one of the dorm rooms. Metal bunk beds filled the walls. Thin mattresses still remained on several frames. Small toys and children's shoes were scattered across the floor beneath years of dust. Near one bed, I found a cassette recorder, old, dirty, barely functioning. Out of curiosity, I pressed the play button. Static filled the room for several seconds. Then children's voices, laughing, singing something quietly. The recording quality was terrible, but the sound alone immediately changed the atmosphere inside the room. Hearing children inside that building felt deeply wrong. The tape suddenly stopped in the middle of the recording. Then silence returned. I slowly put the recorder back down, and that was when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, soft, but unmistakable. I immediately turned toward the doorway. Nothing. The hallway outside remained completely empty. Still, my heartbeat instantly sped up. I walked back into the corridor and pointed the flashlight in both directions. No movement, no sound. Only darkness stretching endlessly through the dormitory wing. I kept trying to stay rational. Old buildings make noise constantly. Wood shifts. Pipes move. Wind pushes doors. But the deeper night became, the harder those explanations were to believe. I continued toward the far end of the second floor until I discovered the isolation rooms. Small rooms separated from the dormitories by heavy doors. Most were empty except for old beds and damaged cabinets. One room still had drawings taped to the wall beside the bed. Stars, clouds, a sun. And underneath them, written in uneven handwriting, "Please let me go home." That sentence stayed in my head far longer than it should have. I eventually realized something else. The building had become colder, much colder, and outside the windows, the forest was already almost completely dark. That uneasy feeling returned stronger than before, like the school itself was becoming more awake as night arrived. Then somewhere downstairs, a door slammed shut. The sound exploded through the entire building. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. Then came silence again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. I stood completely still, listening carefully. That was when I heard another sound. Very faint. Children laughing, far away, somewhere below me. The sound lasted only a few seconds, but hearing it inside that building sent a freezing wave through my entire body. I knew there had to be another explanation. Wind, pipes, my imagination. But every instinct in my body suddenly told me to leave immediately. I started walking back toward the staircase much faster. As I moved through the hallway, several doors slowly creaked against their hinges. Creak, pause, creak. No wind touched the corridor anymore. Everything else remained completely still. I reached the staircase and hurried downstairs. The first floor looked completely different in the dark. The flashlight barely reached the end of the hallways now. Shadows moved strangely across the walls whenever my hands shook. And the deeper darkness became, the more the building felt alive around me. Not haunted, aware. As I passed the reception area again, my flashlight briefly landed on the children's drawing near the entrance. I stopped instantly. The drawing had changed position. I was sure of it. Earlier it had been lying flat on the floor. Now it leaned against the wall facing the hallway. I stared at it for several seconds. Then somewhere upstairs, I heard running. Fast footsteps. Like several children sprinting through the corridor above me. The sound lasted only a moment before suddenly stopping. That was enough. I immediately headed for the exit. At that point, I no longer cared about exploring the rest of the school. I only wanted to get outside. The closer I got to the entrance doors, the heavier the pressure in my chest became. Not physical pressure, psychological, like the building itself didn't want me leaving. I finally stepped outside into the cold evening air. Wind moved violently through the trees surrounding the property. The sky above the school had become nearly black. I walked quickly back toward my car. But before getting inside, I looked back one final time. St. Mary's stood completely motionless in the darkness. Broken windows, empty dormitories, silent hallways hidden behind the walls. And for a moment, I had the overwhelming feeling that something inside the building was watching me from those black windows. Not a ghost, not a monster, something far worse. The memory of every child who had ever felt abandoned there. Even now, months later, I still think about that school sometimes. The drawings, the cassette recorder, the footsteps upstairs, and the terrible feeling that the building itself had been listening to every movement I made. I still explore abandoned places, hospitals, factories, hotels, But I never returned to St. Mary's boarding school. And honestly, I don't think I ever will. Because some places don't become empty after people leave them. Sometimes the loneliness stays behind, and after enough years, it turns into something that watches from the dark.
Friends, thank you for watching to the end. If you don't mind, please support me with a like and a subscription. I'll see this and will make more and better videos. Thank you for your attention.